Let's dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe series. According to the timeline of events, this is the fifth movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, released in 2008 as The Incredible Hulk. The story of The Incredible Hulk takes place after the first two Iron Man films, which is the same year as Iron Man 2. Set in 2010, The Incredible Hulk's real name is Bruce Banner. Bruce is a brilliant nuclear physicist, but during an experiment, he was exposed to a massive amount of gamma radiation, causing a radical transformation in his body. Whenever his emotions become heightened, or his heart rate accelerates, he turns into the Incredible Hulk. During another experiment, Bruce lost control and accidentally hurt his colleagues and the woman he loved. He felt deeply guilty about it. What made it worse for Bruce was that his girlfriend's father, General Thunderbolt Ross, a military officer, wanted to dissect him and study the unique elements in his body to create biological weapons. To avoid the military's pursuit, Bruce went into hiding in a slum in Brazil, where he took on a new identity and worked in a soda bottling plant. He kept a low profile by doing manual labor and repairing machines to make ends meet. The factory owner admired his talent and repeatedly offered him promotions and raises, but Bruce always politely declined. Bruce knew that once his true identity was revealed, the consequences would be disastrous. To keep his emotions under control, Bruce spent a lot of time and money each day paying someone to slap him a few times so he could quickly adjust his breathing. However, no matter what he did, his heart rate would always skyrocket to 146 beats per minute. His daily companions were a television and his pet dog. On one hand, he had to constantly evade the military. On the other, he struggled to control the monster inside him, but his peaceful life was suddenly shattered by an unexpected event. One day, while operating the machines, Bruce cut his finger, and a single drop of blood fell onto the conveyor belt below. He was horrified. He immediately had a co-worker stop the machine and began a thorough inspection. Bruce wiped up the blood and sealed his wound with super glue. Unfortunately, despite his efforts, his blood had already made contact with a nearby bottle. That bottle was soon sent down the automatic assembly line and eventually shipped to a family in the United States. When the military received a report of this unusual incident, they quickly traced it back to Bruce. Ross wasted no time in leading a team of mercenaries to Rio de Janeiro to capture him. On this particular day, just after getting off work, Bruce received a mysterious package. When he got home, he opened his backpack and pulled out a temporary signal receiver to communicate with a mysterious figure who called himself Mr. Blue. Inside the package was a rare Tianshan snow lotus. Bruce carefully snipped off all the petals, ground them down, and extracted the sap. Placing it into a homemade centrifuge to isolate the essence, Bruce hoped that this essence could cure the mutation inside him. However, the results of the experiment were not what he had hoped for. As Bruce observed his blood under the microscope, he saw that the once green blood cells began to return to normal, only to rapidly deteriorate again. Disappointed, he relayed this bad news to Mr. Blue. Mr. Blue suggested they meet in person to better assist him, but Bruce, mindful of his status as a fugitive, politely declined Mr. Blue's offer and opted to send him a sample of his blood for further study. After receiving the sample, Mr. Blue quickly developed a serum to suppress the gamma radiation, but in order to fully cure Bruce, he needed more data, including the degree of cellular infection and the gamma concentration. Unfortunately, all of this data was left in the lab back in the United States. Just as Bruce's glimmer of hope was reignited, it was quickly dashed again. Meanwhile, the military had tracked Bruce's location and surrounded his home. Leading the operation was Blonsky, a Russian elite soldier who relished the challenge of facing stronger opponents. And this time, his target was beyond anything he'd imagined. After confirming Bruce's presence inside the apartment through a hidden camera, Blonsky set up miniature explosives, blew down the door, and fired tranquilizers at the bed. But when Blonsky pulled back the covers, he found the bed empty. It turned out Bruce had already escaped down to a neighbor's apartment through the kitchen window. With the neighbor's help, Bruce temporarily evaded capture, but the danger was far from over. Blending into the crowd, Bruce was soon spotted by the sharp-eyed Blonsky. Using his knowledge of the terrain, Bruce darted through the narrow alleys, trying to outrun the pursuing special forces. However, the extended sprint caused his heart rate to skyrocket, approaching the dangerous threshold. If he transformed into the Hulk in the middle of a residential area, the consequences would be catastrophic. Bruce fought with all his strength to suppress his emotions, but just then, he accidentally bumped into a gang of street thugs. These thugs had always had a bone to pick with Bruce, and now they seized the opportunity to attack, chasing him all the way to the factory. Watching the numbers on his watch about to max out, Bruce knew he was at his limit. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, but the thug's relentless attacks made it impossible for Bruce to keep his cool. At that moment, he heard the urgent beeping from his watch. The next second, an invisible force suddenly erupted, pulling the gang leader into the darkness and flinging him out at lightning speed, killing him instantly. The other two thugs didn't fare much better. As the enraged Hulk easily overpowered them, the special forces were left stunned by what they had just witnessed. Through their night vision goggles, all the soldiers could see was a blurry figure, completely unable to inflict any harm on it. The tranquilizer darts were like mere tickles on Hulk's impenetrable skin, barely even piercing the surface. The flashbang explosions only served to enrage Hulk further, prompting him to hurl a massive forklift, weighing 2.5 tons, directly at them. It was at this moment that Blonsky realized something was seriously wrong with this mission. Despite the heroic sacrifice of his entire team, they still couldn't inflict any real damage on Hulk. But in that life-or-death moment, Blonsky caught a glimpse of Hulk's true form and miraculously avoided a fatal blow. He could only watch as Hulk crashed through the walls and vanished into the darkness of the night. Although they hadn't succeeded in their mission, it wasn't a total failure. They had recovered Bruce's lost computer. Yet, Blonsky was consumed with frustration and confusion over the operation's failure, placing the blame squarely on Ross for withholding crucial information. In Blonsky's mind, if Ross hadn't intentionally concealed the truth, his comrades might not have died in vain. Blonsky had initially thought that Bruce's powers were the result of an ally helping him, but Ross's explanation left him utterly stunned. This revelation only deepened Blonsky's curiosity. What kind of power could make a human so incredibly strong? After returning to the base, Blonsky's determination was reignited. He wasted no time in submitting a formal request to Ross, vowing to personally take down this terrifying monster. Meanwhile, Hulk, now utterly exhausted, had curled up in some remote corner of the jungle. Slowly, the raging Hulk began to revert to his human form. Bruce Banner, all that remained to cover Bruce was a tattered piece of cloth, leaving him in a pitiful state. Fortunately, a kind passerby came to Bruce's aid, allowing him to escape the wilderness and make it back to the edge of the city. In this unfamiliar city, Bruce was utterly alone, unable to speak the language, and reduced to begging for survival on the streets. Yet the world had not completely abandoned him. A small boy's simple act of kindness not only helped ease Bruce's hardship but also reminded him of the warmth of human compassion. But even with this, Bruce's heart remained restless. He frequently woke up from nightmares, haunted by the shadows of gunfire and violence. Desperate to find a cure for himself, Bruce had no choice but to risk returning to the US to retrieve the data Mr. Blue needed. Luckily, there was still one person he could trust back there. Bruce slipped onto a university campus, preparing to reunite with his girlfriend, Betty. Since the incident where Bruce accidentally hurt Betty and fled, he couldn't remember how long it had been since he'd seen her face. And then, without warning, Betty appeared in his line of sight. After 2 years apart, she was still as graceful and beautiful as ever. Just as Bruce was about to step forward and greet her, he was stunned to see that Betty now had a new partner. In that moment, Bruce felt as if his heart had been torn apart. He understood that he no longer had the right to disrupt Betty's life. Perhaps quietly walking away was the only kindness he had left to offer her. With a broken heart, Bruce made his way to his old friend Stanley's pizzeria, the only place he could still call a refuge. Stanley's unconditional trust and support brought Bruce a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Taking advantage of a pizza delivery, Bruce once again sneaked onto the campus. He bribed a poorly paid security guard with a box of pizza to slip unnoticed into his old lab. Filled with hope, Bruce began searching for the data on his experiments, but the military had already destroyed everything related to him. This devastating news left Bruce in utter despair. With no other choice, Bruce prepared to flee once more. As he packed his things and got ready to say goodbye to Stanley, he was unexpectedly spotted by Betty. Betty couldn't believe her eyes and immediately chased after him, but Bruce couldn't bring himself to face her. Crushed, Bruce walked alone through the pouring rain. Passing cars swerved to avoid him, as if he were a plague. But in this moment of despair, one car quietly stopped behind him. It was Betty, his former love. The emotions they had suppressed for so long finally found an outlet in that moment. After learning that Bruce was searching for the old experiment data, Betty revealed that she had kept a backup. She took Bruce back to her home and handed him a small, elegant box containing the data. This data was like a lifeline for Bruce, offering him a glimmer of hope for a cure. Betty begged Bruce to go to the military for help. After all, General Ross was her father, but Bruce knew all too well about Ross's ambitions. Ross only wanted to dissect him and weaponize the Hulk's cells, something Bruce could never accept. So Bruce convinced Betty to go with him to find Mr. Blue, who he believed could save him. However, what Bruce didn't know was that the military had already set a trap, waiting for him. Since the last failed capture attempt, Blonsky's interest in the Hulk had grown even stronger. Ross, sensing Blonsky's hunger for power, decided to reveal the full details of Bruce's experimental secrets to him.
Banner's work was very early phase. It wasn't even weapons application.
He thought he was working on radiation resistance. I would never have told him what the project really was.
But he was so sure of what he was onto that he tested it on himself. And something went very wrong, or it went very right. As far as I'm concerned, that man's whole body is property of the U.S. Army.
Under Ross's guidance, Blonsky arrived at a sealed warehouse and retrieved a vial of blue serum. This serum was a replica of the one used during World War II to create Captain America. Yes, Ross planned to restart the super soldier program from the war. Although Ross warned Blonsky that injecting the serum came with great risks, gaining unknown powers was not guaranteed, and failure could be fatal, Blonsky was unfazed. His mind was consumed with a burning desire for power. With the help of 2 doctors, Blonsky underwent the serum injection. Meanwhile, Bruce was on his way to New York with the experimental data, hoping to seek help from Mr. Blue. What he didn't know was that the military was already on his tail. When he realized something was wrong, Bruce immediately took off running, but 2 legs could never outrun 4 wheels. With no way out, Bruce fled onto the campus, searching for a place to hide. However, the soldiers quickly caught up, cornering Bruce on a footbridge. Seeing the situation, Ross ordered both sides of the bridge to be sealed off and had tear gas canisters thrown inside, trying to smoke Bruce out. Betty, desperate to save Bruce, rushed forward, only to be tackled to the ground by soldiers behind her. This scene completely enraged Bruce, who instantly transformed into the Hulk. Hulk leaps down from the bridge, vowing to teach the army a lesson for bullying the honest people. The sheer strength of Hulk made bullets and artillery seem utterly useless. He easily knocked over the armored car, picked it up and slammed it into the soldiers aside. The army, facing Hulk's terrifying power, crumbled in disarray. In that moment, the might of modern industries seemed pathetically fragile. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Ross immediately dispatched Blonsky, who had just received the serum enhancement. Armed with a grenade launcher, Blonsky charged at Hulk alone. With his enhanced agility, he darted and weaved around Hulk, trying to find a weakness, but Blonsky underestimated Hulk's near-impenetrable defenses.
Thank God he's doing it. Move him toward the cannons!
After several exchanges, Blonsky was forced to retreat, drawing Hulk into the sonic weapon zone that had been preset. This sonic weapon was actually borrowed from Iron Man by Ross. The powerful sound waves instantly sent Blonsky flying and temporarily subdued Hulk's movements. Hulk clutched his head in agony, clearly affected by the intense sound waves, but this was only temporary. After a moment, Hulk managed to stand back up. Using a shield to block some of the sonic blasts, Hulk then hurled a shield, slicing an armored vehicle in half, and with a massive leap, destroyed another one. Seeing this, Blonsky refused to back down and charged at Hulk again, ready for a showdown.
Is that all you got?
But Hulk wasn't interested in a war of words. He kicked Blonsky with such force that he sent him flying into a tree. Realizing the ground forces were helpless, Ross immediately called for air support, even if it meant destroying the campus. He was determined to end Hulk here. What Ross didn't anticipate was that his daughter, Betty, had quietly approached Hulk, hoping to awaken the humanity buried deep within him, but then support helicopter gunships roar in, raining down fire on Hulk and Betty. Hulk, reacting instinctively, threw his shield with precision, taking out the helicopter in one blow, engulfing the surroundings in flames. Hulk, with his immense strength, shielded his girlfriend from the heart of the explosion. He let out a deep, menacing roar at Ross, serving as a final warning, and then Hulk slowly vanished into the billowing smoke. Carefully cradling Betty in his arms, Hulk led her into a secluded cave, seeking a brief moment of peace. When Betty awoke from her unconsciousness, she was startled by the sight of the massive Hulk before her. Looking at the Hulk standing outside the cave and letting the rain wash away, Betty's heart gradually realized that Bruce had not completely lost himself. Gathering her courage, Betty slowly stepped out of the cave. She gently took Hulk's seemingly fearsome but truly gentle hand, leading him back into the cave to escape the rain. Inside, faced with her monstrous-looking former lover, Betty did everything she could to calm the storm brewing inside him. In that quiet understanding, they both drifted into sleep without even realizing it. When the morning light filled the cave again, Bruce had returned to his normal form. Gently, Betty dressed him, shielding him from the early morning chill. With the last of her cash, Betty arranged for Bruce to stay in a modest but warm motel. After a night of chaos and terror, Bruce was utterly exhausted, and even the spray from the shower felt like a barrage of bullets to him. He could only curl up in the bathtub, trying to soothe the turmoil inside. Thankfully, Betty remained by his side, never leaving him. Determined to help Bruce escape this endless hunt, Betty made the difficult decision to sell her late mother's gold necklace in order to buy Bruce the essential supplies he needed. She even helped him tidy up his hair. These intimate physical contact makes their hearts close together, as if they want to make up for the regrets of the past 2 years in this moment. However, just when they were immersed in the happy atmosphere, the sudden sound of a ticking sound on Bruce's wrist was like a bolt from the blue, which broke the tranquility in an instant.
I can't get too excited.
In contrast, Blonsky's fate was particularly tragic. Although Hulk's kick hadn't killed him, it left Blonsky with shattered nerves throughout his body, leaving him helpless on a hospital bed. However, the serum had granted Blonsky extraordinary regenerative abilities, and in just 2.5 days, his body miraculously healed, becoming even stronger than before. The rush of power thrilled Blonsky, and he was eager for another chance to face off against Hulk. Meanwhile, the military ramped up their efforts. They monitored Betty's phone and credit card records, and even traced Mr. Blue's email account. Ross realizes that Bruce will contact Mr. Blue again if he wants to cure himself. As expected, the military intercepted an email Bruce sent and quickly locked in on Mr. Blue's location. A carefully planned trap was being set, waiting for Bruce to walk right into it. Accompanied by Betty, Bruce resolutely headed toward Mr. Blue's university. Mr. Blue was, in fact, Dr. Samuel Stearns, a cellular biologist. As a biology PhD, Samuel had his own private lab, and using the data Bruce had provided, he had found a way to suppress the Hulk. Inside the lab, Samuel injected a vial of purple liquid into the operating console. He instructed Bruce to lie on the testing table and secured him with protective restraints. As the equipment powered on, the purple antidote slowly flowed into Bruce's bloodstream. To ensure the antidote's effectiveness, Samuel decided to awaken the Hulk within Bruce. A sharp pain instantly surged through Bruce's body, his heart rate skyrocketing, and the power of the Hulk began to stir inside him. Ready to explode at any moment, Bruce's skin gradually turned a deep green, and the sound of cracking bones echoed as if his body was about to break apart. At this critical moment, Betty bravely climbed onto Hulk's enormous body. Her bold action not only showed incredible courage but also bought Samuel precious time to inject the antidote. As the antidote was administered, Hulk's consciousness slowly began to fade until he finally passed out. His body gradually returned to Bruce's human form. The experiment was a success. However, Samuel bluntly admitted that he couldn't guarantee whether the Hulk was permanently erased or only temporarily suppressed. As a precaution, Samuel secretly copied large amounts of Bruce's blood samples, planning to continue his research. Little did he know that this reckless act would bring an unimaginable crisis to the world. Just as Bruce was preparing to destroy these blood samples, the military had already moved in. A sniper from a distance took aim and precisely fired a tranquilizer dart into Bruce's body. Blonsky rushed into the lab and grabbed the defenseless Bruce. Bruce was quickly taken away by the military, leaving Samuel alone to face the barrage of questions from the government scientists. Instead, Blonsky sneaks up from behind and knocks out the scientist. His goal wasn't to save Samuel, he wanted the same power that Hulk possessed. If Samuel could suppress the Hulk, then surely he could create one. Blonsky knew that even with the enhancements from the serum, his strength was still no match for the real Hulk. So Blonsky and the mad scientist Samuel struck a twisted bargain to use gamma rays once more, injecting Bruce's blood into Blonsky's body. Under the intense bombardment of gamma radiation, Blonsky's body rapidly swelled, becoming monstrously grotesque. At that moment, Hulk's arch-nemesis, the Abomination, was born. The Abomination burst through the window and leaped out, plunging the entire street into chaos. Meanwhile, Samuel's head, infected with Bruce's blood, began to mutate. In the original comics, Samuel would go on to transform into another major villain in the Marvel Universe, known as the Leader. Out in the streets, the Abomination was wreaking havoc across the city. It was as if he had gained the power to destroy the world itself. Even rocket launchers were mere toys in his hands. Faced with such a powerful foe, the military was utterly helpless. All they could do was watch as the Abomination rampaged through the city. But in this desperate moment, Bruce stepped forward voluntarily, having injected the suppressing serum. Whether or not the Hulk could awaken was entirely uncertain. Under the stunned gazes of those around him, Bruce gently kissed Betty goodbye, then resolutely let go of her hand and jumped out of the plane. Just as everyone thought Bruce had sacrificed himself, a massive fist suddenly emerged from the ground. Then, Hulk burst out from the ground. The excitement of dying successfully awakened Hulk's consciousness. Abomination also senses Hulk's breath, and he accelerates towards Hulk, vowing to make a clean break for him. Almost simultaneously, they both leaped into the air, engaging in a fierce battle. However, due to the effects of the serum, Hulk's strength had diminished, and after just one exchange, he was thrown aside by the Abomination. Facing a powerful enemy, Hulk had no choice but to seek assistance from external objects. He tore apart a nearby police car, using the pieces as makeshift weapons, and repeatedly smashed them against the charging Abomination. But the Abomination easily withstood the blows and kicked Hulk away with one powerful strike. Just as the Abomination was about to press his advantage, a helicopter interrupted his momentum. He was going to lure the helicopter to the roof and look for an opportunity to shoot it down. Sensing that Betty was in danger inside the helicopter, Hulk immediately climbed up the building to stop the Abomination, but Hulk was a moment too late. The helicopter was swaying in the air, and the pilot had no choice but to make an emergency landing. The cabin was in complete chaos. Fortunately, the helicopter landed safely. However, the Abomination remained unscathed, his focus locked solely on Hulk, his one true opponent. The two clashed again, but in Hulk's mind, there was only one thought: saving Betty. The crash had ruptured the fuel tank, and sparks were flying everywhere, threatening an imminent explosion. Hulk's divided attention resulted in Abomination pinning him against the wall and beating him. Struggling desperately, Hulk fought to break free, but Abomination's strength felt as immovable as a mountain. On the brink of despair, Hulk caught a glimpse of Betty's fragile face, and an overwhelming surge of protectiveness flooded his heart. He knew he couldn't let Betty get hurt. With a final burst of strength, Hulk pried apart Abomination's iron-like grip and then delivered a powerful headbutt, knocking him back a few steps. Taking advantage of Abomination's momentary stumble, Hulk quickly grabbed him by the head and slammed it into the solid wall with immense force. At the same time, the flying sparks accidentally ignited the surrounding gasoline, and flames quickly spread. In this critical moment, Hulk didn't hesitate, saving Betty and Ross from certain disaster. But Hulk, outside the cabin, wasn't so lucky. Recovering, Abomination grabbed a nearby chain and, like a raging beast, charged at Hulk, striking him with such force that he sent Hulk flying. Hulk barely regained his footing before Abomination struck him again, knocking him to the ground. In this life-or-death moment, the sudden appearance of Ross and Betty distracted Abomination. Ross had just given the order to open fire on him. Feeling betrayed by Ross, Abomination's rage intensified, and he swore to kill them both. With a deafening roar, Hulk unleashed a decisive punch, a blow so powerful it shook the very ground. Abomination lost his balance in an instant, and the chain slipped from his hands, crashing down on him with brutal force. Seizing the moment, Hulk grabbed the chain and wrapped it tightly around Abomination's neck from behind. Despite Abomination's frantic struggle and wild attacks, Hulk held firm, as immovable as a rock, his grip unwavering. After a fierce struggle, Abomination finally lost the strength to fight back. Just as Hulk was about to deliver the fatal blow, Betty's voice called out to him, stopping him in his tracks. He looked into her clear, gentle eyes, and the fury in his heart slowly began to subside. Hulk understood that Betty didn't want him to become a bloodthirsty monster, so he loosened the chain and tossed the now defenseless Abomination aside. Hulk planted a foot on Abomination's chest, declaring his victory with a kingly stance. He then handed Abomination over to the military personnel, who had finally arrived. Watching the entire scene, Ross quietly holstered his gun. Despite Hulk saving the city, in the eyes of the onlookers, he remained a figure to be feared. Hulk knew this all too well. No matter how hard he tried to change, people's prejudice and fear would be difficult to overcome. Apart from Betty, Hulk found almost no one in the world who could understand or accept him. So, despite the sadness and reluctance in his heart, Hulk decided to leave for the sake of Betty's happiness. Under the watchful eyes of the military, Hulk moved through the shadows of the city, eventually disappearing into the vast night. Time passed, and 2.5 years quietly slipped by. Bruce reappeared in the wilderness of Canada. After relentless effort and training, Bruce had finally found a way to coexist in harmony with the Hulk. He even used his saved-up money to buy back Betty's mother's necklace and send it to her anonymously. After the incident, General Ross, once his adversary, was stripped of his power by the military. He had no choice but to drown himself in alcohol, seeking relief from his downfall, until the arrival of Iron Man, when everything seemed to change. By this time, Tony had already solved his palladium poisoning issue and had become a consultant for S.H.I.E.L.D. According to the comics, General Ross would eventually become the Red Hulk. Unfortunately, the Incredible Hulk wasn't well received at the time, so any plans for a sequel were indefinitely shelved. Let's continue exploring the Marvel Universe together. See you next time.